we're at 6:01, so we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining. My name is attorney Wendy Guthrow, and with me as a co-presenter today is Josh Franklin. And Josh is a financial advisor at Evergreen Financial, Raymond James in Burlington, Massachusetts. And most of you know, I'm also have my practice focused in Burlington. I am an estate planning, elder law, probate estate administration attorney for both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I love trusts, and I love taking care of my clients in every way possible, especially from a legal perspective, that I believe in the three-legged stool approach to making sure that you have legal member on your team, a financial member on your team, and a tax professional on your team. And when I met Josh Franklin and shared my philosophy with him, he thought it would be great for us to kind of get together and do a joint presentation, because a lot of the things that we have in common with our clients are things such as this topic, cybersecurity. So Josh had a great presentation already that we could present to both of our clients as well as to the general public. And that was the premise for this presentation. So we're going to start today by having Josh kind of walk us through the presentation. And then there's a chat that's open, that anyone that has a question regarding cybersecurity and any of the points we bring up, you can simply put your question in the chat. Or at the end of the presentation, anyone can unmute and just raise your hand or just indicate that you have a question. But first, we'll go to answer any of the questions that are in the chat, and then we'll take questions from the audience. It's pretty much a 30-minute presentation without questions. So I'm going to bring up Josh's presentation and share it. Josh, you want to just take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for the introduction there. And I've known Wendy for a couple of years, and I love the three-legged stool approach. I think that's a perfect way that we can encapsulate the way that all of your professionals should be working together with one another. And the other thing that I love about Wendy and her practice is that from day one, I could tell that she was really focused on education and explaining how different things work in all different facets, not just estate planning. So when we connected recently and we were talking about different topics, I was excited that she chose cybersecurity, because this is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. So it makes sense. And I've been following it, not just on a professional basis, but also on a personal basis, trying to figure out ways that we can better protect ourselves. But a little bit about myself, I'm married to my beautiful wife. We got married a couple of years ago, and we now have two kids, Maeve and Wesley. So we have a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old. So our lives are a little crazy right now. And it's always nice to get back to some of these passion projects and talking about things that I'm really interested outside of just the children's programming and strollers and formula and that stuff. So my practice is based in Burlington, as Wendy said, and I'm on a team here of financial advisors that really focus on financial planning. So we help with retirement plans, we help with life events, buying a house, selling a house, moving, things like that. And a lot of those are things that we can help mitigate risk and explain how to protect yourself, through different securities and diversification. But cybersecurity, I think, is coming more and more to the forefront as something that we need our professional, executives to kind of step up and take this on, because if you didn't have us explaining, what's going on from a finance standpoint, then there's not a whole lot of other good places to go for information on how to protect yourself online. So we're going to start off talking about kind of setting the stage where we came from. So obviously the internet hasn't been around for all of our lives, really, especially not in the facet that it is today, and how much it's penetrated into everything that we do. And we're also going to talk about some real life examples of scams and fraudulent attempts that even myself and our clients have experienced recently. And lastly, we really want to talk about some simple steps that you can take today and products and services that will help protect your assets Really just best practices, what we're looking for. So to kind of set the stage of where this all began, I like to explain. So I got started about 10 years ago on our team in financial services. And over the past 10 years, what we've done and how we work with our clients has completely transformed. And even with the seminar, I was telling Wendy, when we first got started, all of our seminars were in person. So the thought of even hosting something like this, wasn't even on our radar. And now it's second nature that you're getting invited to these great webinars that are all online. But two of the senior partners on my team, they got started in the late 90s. And right before the presentation, I had to look it up to make sure it was true. But Google as a company was founded in 1998. So you think about how far the internet has come since just 1998. This is all within one career. And we have some younger advisors on the team as well. But things are changing rapidly in the financial landscape. And this week also happens to be my grandmother's 96th birthday. So she's up in Peabody, and she lived in Malden her whole life. She used to work at the Malden Credit Union. So she was in banking back then. And, before the internet, before the 90s, none of this existed at all. So the slide up on your screen right now just explains a little bit of how much the internet and digitally, has penetrated our lives. And now when we send a message to one another, we're not sending something through the mail. We're sending it by text message or email. When we want to buy a coffee at Starbucks, more often than not, I'm using a credit card or even my phone sometimes. I'm not really carrying around cash like I would have in the past. So the result is that our lives have changed, I think a lot for the better. And Wendy, if you flip over to the next slide, there's some examples on here of, then and now. And I like to think of then as the early 2000s or maybe the 90s, because I like to highlight that things are changing very quickly. And it's not just, this multi-decade, phenomenon. This is going to be in a couple of years, everything that we talk about today is going to sound outdated and a little bit different than what reality is. So I'll kind of pick on that third example, getting a cab, because I've been doing a lot of traveling recently. And when I was in college, we didn't have Uber or Lyft or anything on our phones. There was car services and there were yellow taxi cabs. And it was just an experience that you didn't necessarily love to do. And I remember kind of having that stress in the back of my mind when you're looking at the ticker on the cab and you see the dollar amount going up, and maybe you're not very familiar with the area. So you don't know if you're getting taken advantage of or if someone went the back way so that they could charge you more. Nowadays with Uber, I was able to get a car in different cities within minutes, and I know exactly who's driving that car. And moreover, if I need to send a car up to my grandmother to, take her to wherever she needs to go, I can track their location along the way. So if I'm nervous, about a parent or a child, this level of technology has truly improved our lives for the better. I think we want to highlight that more than anything else. This isn't to scare you into not using the internet or to start disconnecting, but I think it's important again to notice how many of these day-to-day things that we're doing are so intricately involved with the internet. And for better or for worse, that means that our information is also out on the internet as well. So it's something that I think a lot of people have come to terms with. You've seen so many data breaches and 300 million consumers affected, or whatever the numbers come out to be. But what we want to just kind of go through, especially in this presentation, this setting, is to talk about some examples of what people have done wrong, and then also talk about examples of what people are doing right today to protect themselves. Because the reality is that even if we're almost perfect all the time, there's still going to be one or two instances in your lifetime where you're affected by these things. So we want to make sure that we understand why it's happening and then how to make it stop or how to further protect ourselves going forward. We have some examples up on the screen. These are the risks and maybe a couple ways of how thieves can steal your identity. I'm going to talk about even more than these ones up here, but the first three that I'll highlight are, things that we would probably be familiar with from the physical world. So credit card theft, skimming, and dumpster diving. Credit card theft, for example, if someone stole your purse or your wallet, or maybe you just misplaced it and then a day or two later it turned back up again, and the cash was gone, but everything else was in there. I think is like kind of the common story that people hear. But with credit card theft, if someone takes your credit card, even if they don't have the physical card, but they have a photo of the front and the back, they can go online and use that as if they were you. So if you ever thought that your wallet or your purse was compromised and you weren't sure, but everything's still in there, just know that, you don't necessarily need the physical card anymore. Skimming is something that you used to hear a little bit more about, maybe not as much anymore. But that would be like if you went to the gas station and someone put a device right in front of the card reader where you were still able to get your gas and do your transaction, but in the physical world, right in between, someone else also skimmed all the information off that card as well. So, two different physical world examples. The third one there, dumpster diving. If you have important statements or old cards, anything with your financial information on there, we always recommend shredding or destroying in a secure location, because we've heard of instances where people go through recycling. My mom was someone who kept everything nice and neat, all those, documents in a paper bag. And then once a year or twice a year, she would bring it all in and we would go through and shred it one by one. So I would say that that's best practice, but especially in an office setting or even at home, if you're throwing away something that has your social security number on it, make sure that it is disposed of properly. So in the physical world, these are kind of the obvious ones that I think have, most people have been exposed to, but more and more we're talking about protecting yourself in the digital world. And the phishing example that's right in the center of your screen, I think is the number one thing that people need to be cognizant of today. Phishing, could be in email form. It can also be something that we call like pre-texting, so it can be in text form. But what this basically means is that someone has a little bit of your information and they're trying to see if they can get more information out of you. So that might come in the form of an email that you think is from Bank of America, and they're saying that, your PIN is outdated. Please log in here to update your PIN. And rather than the link in that email sending you to the official Bank of America website, they're going to try to get you to go to another website that looks and feels just like it, but it's going to encourage you to enter in more of your personal information to help fix a problem. So they know that a lot of people are not going to fall for this. Sometimes you get these emails or these messages and it's just almost in gibberish. So you ignore it right away, but it only takes a little percentage of the people that they try to send these out to in mass to respond or to accidentally click on something, and they get exactly what they want. So that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. Some other ones, unsecured websites, we just kind of talked about. Shoulder surfing, if someone's looking over your shoulder and they see you type in the PIN on your cell phone, that means that they also have access to a lot of other security features or, I'm thinking of my iPhone, for example. If I log in to Venmo or to some other applications, there's really only one PIN that Apple will use. So again, if someone's looking for that, and the people that are stealing this information are not necessarily the people that are using it. So when you just flipped over, the dark web is where it's kind of like a marketplace for your information. And the way that I describe this, because I don't have the technical background, I should say that too. I meant to say that right at the very beginning, is that I'm definitely not a programmer. I'm not like an ex-FBI agent or anything. So there's definitely people out there that have much better technical background, but what you need to know about the dark web is basically that the surface internet is everything that comes up on Google. So if you Google something and you get 1,000 pages of search results, that's on the surface web. That's what's public. And if you're like me, every once in a while, you'll Google your own name and you'll see old articles or maybe something from your hometown that shows your address and some other information. That's really all surface web. And just because you don't find anything on the surface web doesn't mean that your data isn't changing hands on the dark web, the part of the internet that's not indexed by Google or whatever other provider, will create those indexes. So all you need to know here is that you're not going to accidentally stumble onto the dark web and start sharing your information out there with these criminals, but that if your information is exposed, that these criminals are going out and they might be trying to sell it to someone else. So we'll talk about a little bit later some third-party services that can help monitor and alert you if your information is out there. But you don't have to worry about going on these websites and trying to monitor yourself. So this next slide, I'm going to ask really the first question. If you guys can respond in the chat, feel free, or just kind of respond in your head. But the first one I think is really important to highlight. And the question is, what is the least secure way to make a purchase today? And I'll read through. So we've got a credit card, a debit card, check, an app, or just going online and making a purchase. Let's see.
And an app you're saying would be like a Dunkin' Donuts app or a Starbucks
Exactly,
app?
or a Starbucks. Yeah, if you're ordering coffee and you have some money preloaded on there and you select. So that would be the app. Online would be just going to a website and putting in your information there. And then the first three
So
are
one
kind of,
person saying E, somebody else is saying an app or a check. Somebody
yeah,
else says a
perfect.
check.
Yeah, so I'll stop us right there. I think the check is
Okay.
definitely the one that we like to pull out of the bunch. And the reason why is that every check that you have from your bank has some very important private information on it. And when checks first started becoming widespread use, probably in the 1940s, 50s, you didn't really have to worry about your information leaking out everywhere. But nowadays, if someone has a copy of your check, not only do they have often your name and your address in the top left corner, but they definitely have your bank's name and the routing number, along with the account number that's listed along the bottom, and maybe even the check number as well. So that's a lot of private information. And there's some people that we might trust with that, like if it was a utility company or your mortgage, company that are paying your taxes directly. Those are important. Yeah, I just saw someone commented they also have your signature because you have to sign that check. So now they know exactly how you sign and what that looks like. And I think it's important to highlight that there's so many different ways that you can pay for things now that if we can minimize the amount of checks that we're sending out, think like the landscaper or the house cleaner, for example. Those are two people that are trustworthy in one sense, but in another sense, we don't want physical checks going through people's hands, getting lost, or maybe even falling into the wrong hands. So that's what I would definitely highlight out of number one. The second question, we can just skip over that one for now, but we're going to get into how we recommend our clients are, making payments today. And, moreover, highlight option A on there, the credit card, and, how you can protect yourself using credit cards. So in 2024, this is one thing that I think really hasn't changed over the past 20, 30 years, is that right from the start, it was clear that email was going to be this killer application that everyone was going to need. But it's now become clear that it's not going away anytime soon. So when you sign up for a username and password or, on some new website, the first thing that they'll ask you is what your name is, and the second thing that they'll ask you is what your email is. And we find that in 2024, personal email is actually the number one issue and number one space that people are compromising their data in, above and beyond almost all other parts of their lives. So what this means is that when you type in your social security number or a bank account number into an email, that information is indexed by the email provider, and whoever else is on the other side of it, it's going to be on their email as well. And if it's not going through an encrypted or secure email, then someone could gain access to your account and they could look through your sent folder and they could see exactly what you sent, all the information on there. So I think that it's really important to pay attention to what is going through your email at any given point. And if there's information that you need to share, like an account number, like a social security number, that you should opt for a phone call or some sort of secure message center to share that type of information. So that's the one thing that I'd highlight. And the way that these compromises are happening are often through not secure passwords. So this is something that I think that we've known about for a long time. We just didn't have great options out there to help us make stronger passwords. But I think it's easier now than ever before for your password to be guessed. And if someone has some information or maybe even a password from another account, something that is completely unrelated to your bank or your credit card, they're going to start trying to use that and trying to gain access. So um, one thing that I think has changed, I'll highlight this for my career in the past 10 years, was that we encouraged people back in 2014, 2015 to get online and to put their statements online and set up that online profile. But back then, two-factor verification on your login or for your email was not standard. I don't even know if it really existed at most organizations. And what that is, I'm sure most people are pretty familiar, but when you log in and you're asked to get that text message and put in a 6-digit PIN, that's called a two-factor authentication. And before we had that, if someone had your username and password, they could basically log into your account and see and take whatever information that they wanted without you even knowing in some cases. So by adding this second layer, not just your username or your password, but also your phone and this text message that they're sending securely, we've been able to mitigate a large number of compromises. So even if you did have your username and password compromised for some reason, if those people didn't have access to your phone or to receive a text message, then you might have done just enough to protect yourself until you can go in and change those username and passwords to something else. Our recommendation is to reset passwords at least once or twice a year, which sounds like a lot, but when there is some sort of breach, this will be probably the greatest thing that you've done because you won't have to worry about all of those old passwords flowing through to different places. Um, on the next page, Wendy, if you want to flip over for me, there's some really great products out there that we've been encouraging our clients to use that couple in password security with other features as well. So basically what these password managers will do is they'll help you create a secure password and they'll protect that behind their encryption as well. So a lot of times you might not even be able to say or dictate these passwords yourself. You need to have them open the door for you. But some of them, like I see up there, the 1Password that I'm familiar with, they're hooked into all of the big banks, all the big providers, and they're able to help make recommendations on how to make your passwords stronger and continuously reset them on your behalf. Another bullet that I want to highlight here down at the bottom is the autofill feature. And I think that that's like a perfect encapsulation of the convenience versus security trade-off, which is to say that when you open up your laptop or your iPad and your username and password are already pre-filled in there for you, it's the most convenient thing ever. I love it sometimes, and it gets me right into where I need to go so fast. But the problem with it is that if anyone else gains access to your device, or if you leave your laptop open too long, then that's a website or a bank that everyone has access to if they go and your information's already pre-filled in there. So when I go onto my Chrome, I use Google Chrome for my browser on my computer. I make sure I turn off that autofill feature so that the browser isn't automatically tracking what I'm putting in there. And a lot of times there'll be a little drop down from the top that says, do you want to keep this information in your password keychain? And at first I was a big adopter. I was using it, but now I've kind of gone in the other direction. I've decoupled the password keychains and made sure that even if I lose my phone and someone else somehow gets in because they know my passcode, that even then they won't have the ability to take that next step necessarily. So that's a big one. I see the stat down the bottom. I don't know how up to date this is, but I think at least for our clients, when we're having these conversations, it sounds about right that only 1 in 5 Americans are using these sort of password manager applications. So that means that 80% of people are just making up these passwords on their own. And of that 80%, hopefully not, they're complex enough. They're not, ABC 123 type passwords. Um, so
Yeah, I thought that this was some good examples of, a weak, a medium, and a stronger password. I thought very applicable. And also to use phrases, I think is very good idea and something simple that people could implement.
totally agree. Totally agree, Wendy. And for data protection, I think so. We'll step out a little bit outside of just email for a second. So this is just everything that you're doing on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad, is really understanding how information is traveling and where it's going. So we almost always recommend not using public Wi-Fi hotspots anymore. And I see that bullet on there without a VPN. We're going to talk about VPNs in a little bit, but public Wi-Fi, for example, at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts is probably going to be okay. They can see a lot of their traffic and what people are doing on their Wi-Fi. But the one that I'm most concerned about is when someone tries to copy or they're trying to mimic what that public Wi-Fi server looks like. And it's happened to me a couple times where I go somewhere that I know the Wi-Fi should be locked. It should have that little lock icon with a password next to it, but all of a sudden there's a new one that pops up that says, Dunkin' Donuts free or Dunkin', whatever wherever I am. So what that could mean is that someone is sitting at the table next to you, or they hid something in the bathroom, a new, router, and they're trying to copy this restaurant or this place's online Wi-Fi to get you to go onto their internet. And once you're on their internet, it's unclear how much they can see at any given time, but a lot of times when you're entering in your information or you're going to websites, they can see all of your traffic. They can see maybe even keystrokes in some scenarios. So that's my biggest fear when I go out to public places and I'm logging in to these Wi-Fi, different servers. So I try to avoid that altogether. I think that's a big one that can save you without even realizing that you're giving up your information. Another bullet point that I think is important is backing up your data to a secure offline location. So I have a little device that kind of sits next to my laptop, and I can do a full reset of my old, laptop for however far back I want. And what it means is basically if someone gains access to your computer or the files and you need to get rid of that computer, that you have a copy sitting right there and it's offline. It's not necessarily stored online or in the cloud. You have a physical backup. So things that I would recommend putting there would be like photos or important documents that you have saved. Those are the ones that you don't necessarily want to be up on the cloud or want to be out there in other places. So just by having that physical backup, I think is really great for most people. We talked a little bit about
I'd also like
storing.
to,
Oh, sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
no, I thought you were moving on, but I was just wanted to also mention on Wi-Fi hotspots, another area that's really susceptible to breaching is airport free Wi-Fis, that they are just filled with people just trying to get at your information. So as much as it's very convenient at the airport when you've got time to kill and you're getting on their free Wi-Fi on your laptop or your phone, just be aware that you're really exposing yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to highlight, there's a couple more on here that I think are really important that I think are like easy recommendations. Even if you don't take away a whole lot from today, these are things that you could go on right now in 30 seconds and update, and it might really make a big difference in the long run. But one of them is setting a lock screen password and then also adding that 1 minute of inactivity locking feature. And what that means is if you accidentally leave your phone unlocked while you're browsing an article, the default right now isn't necessarily that it's going to lock itself. So it might just sit on the counter unlocked for 30 minutes, an hour, however long before you come back to it. And during that time, someone else can walk over and access, your phone, maybe some other applications they can move around there. So just by adding that 1 minute of inactivity feature on there for your iPhone, we'll lock it after a certain amount of time. And the next one under, I think, is also important because we talked about that dual authentication, is that I don't allow my text messages to show up on the screen unless I've unlocked the phone. So if someone has my phone and they can't unlock it, but they can see those text messages coming in, they can get your authentication PIN without even unlocking the phone. So I think that's an important thing to realize. Like, even if some of your phone is locked down, if you're not doing these other little steps, then some people can still work their way around. And the last thing that I'll highlight, which I think is super important, is turning off location services for unnecessary apps. And I'll give you one quick example. We actually had a client come in this morning who showed me like a phishing text message that she got. And I can't say, I don't have like the technical background to say this is what's going on, but she sent a package at UPS last week for the first time, probably all year. And soon after she sent it, she got a phishing text message that said that your package from USPS could not be delivered. Please click here for more information. And she was close enough to the UPS store that she just walked over and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they said, "Nothing. It looks great to us. I don't know." So she showed them the text message, and they pretty quickly identified, hey, this came from USPS, not UPS. And it also came on a Sunday, and they're not even open on a Sunday. So I don't know what's going on here, but I think this is just a scam, and you can ignore it. So that was one that she was able to squash because she reached out to the company directly. But my thought that I don't know if this is the case on her phone. If she has location services turned on for an app that is leaking out her location, or they know that she's been to a UPS store recently, someone might be able to use that information and make it even more targeted and very specific to that one person. So I would go into my settings if you haven't already done this, and especially on apps that are old or you don't use them very often. We want to turn off location services completely, or maybe just while you're using the app, they can see where you are. But we've seen people who have nieces and nephews download games on their phone, and a couple months later, we realized that that game was tracking everywhere that they went for months and months and months without them realizing it, even though they weren't playing the game anymore. So just because it's on your phone, we want to make sure that those location services are turned off. But I think that that's a big one that you can do in a couple minutes, and you just never have to worry about that going forward. So a VPN, I don't know if anyone has experience with these, but this is a way that you can protect yourself, especially if you're a business owner or if you're handling other people's personal information. This is basically the gold standard now for hiding your information. So if you can think of all of your web traffic going up and down in the internet and everything that you're typing, if you're not using a VPN, then it all goes through in plain English, more or less. So you can kind of see that information, and you can read everything on the screen just like you can read a book. But what a VPN will do is, right before it goes out to the receiver, it's going to scramble your information, and it's going to make it into a language that nobody could understand. It wouldn't make any sense, even if someone were to capture it. So the benefit to having that VPN layered into what you're already doing is that it gives you this layer of animosity or anonymity, excuse me, where they can't see what you're doing, even if you're in broad daylight, because what you're doing is not in a language that these hackers will understand. So best practices, especially if you're someone who, if you heard me say like, don't use the Wi-Fi at Starbucks, and you're like, you're crazy for saying, I would say that a VPN would give you that extra layer of security that even if you accidentally clicked on the wrong Wi-Fi, or if someone did gain access to the public airport Wi-Fi, for example, that your information is not going to be the one that's targeted. That's just going to be kind of the gibberish in there. So I think that's pretty much enough. I mean, VPNs, I don't have any recommendations, I would say, on specific VPN services to use. But I would say that if you are someone who's handling data for other people or for yourself, that a VPN would be a great addition to what you're already doing. Um, and when you're shopping online, this is sort of where we're getting at, with these changes that have happened over the past few decades and that are certainly accelerating, is that, people aren't paying with cash or checks like they used to. Almost everything is going the way of the credit card. And the credit card is now transitioning from a physical card that you hold in your hand to a card that's digital and that you're going to be using online. So we always recommend shopping with reputable vendors. And what I mean by that is like the Amazons, the Walmarts of the world. A lot of times when you Google a product that you buy often, you might see another website that is selling it for like 50 cents cheaper than what you can get it on Amazon. And we would say maybe that's not worth it. Maybe don't engage with these small third-party companies because you don't necessarily know what they're doing with your information on the back end. So we really like recommending shopping with these big vendors online, and trying not to provide any unnecessarily personal information when you do log in. When you set up an account, I would be okay adding a credit card or especially like PayPal or Apple Pay right now, to my account and keeping it in there. For some, like Amazon, for example, I've got my credit card, but I would definitely not use my debit card online anyway. The reason being is that your debit card gives direct access to your bank account and the money in there. So when money leaves your bank account, it doesn't necessarily come back in very easily. A credit card, on the other hand, gives you that kind of the in-between middleman where American Express or Visa or MasterCard and all of their partners on top of them, they're standing between that interaction online. And if one of the charges is fraudulent or something got doubled, it's really their money that you're spending until you pay off your card. So I always recommend using a credit card. Right now, I have my credit card linked up to PayPal and to Apple Pay. So when I see Apple Pay and when I'm checking out on my phone, I can use my credit card through Apple Pay. But I know that that's secure. And if my credit card was ever breached or if I was nervous that someone else had the number, I would just reach out to Chase Bank, have them send me a new card and relink it online. I would also, I know I talked about this before, but buying a shredder, or if you have access to an institution that has that shredding availability, I would definitely do that. I think that that's something that we kind of take for granted, that you can just kind of tear up a piece of paper and throw it in the trash and that no one can put it back together. But the reality is, with all of the technology that's out there right now, if you take a picture of a ripped up piece of paper and put it into an AI application, the AI will figure out how to put it back together in 5 minutes. So it's those sorts of things are definitely out there. I don't think that they're being used at scale right now, but that's what I would expect going forward. If something is compromised in the physical world, just because it's ripped up, or if bend your credit card in half, don't assume that someone can't just put it right back together and try to use it for bad purposes. Um, Another thing that I'll point to is the pre-approved credit card offers and opening up credit cards at different vendors. I think that they might have certain deals that are attractive at times, but it will, the more lines of credit that you have, the harder it is to manage all of them. And it might open you up to, just more activity, more things to monitor. So Wendy, if you flip over to the next screen, I think this is a really good one to highlight. And we only have a couple more after this. So a credit freeze is something that can be done with each of the major credit bureaus. There's three big bureaus in the US. And what it means is that when you freeze your credit, it means that no new applications can go through their systems until you unfreeze it. And the reason why we like leaving your credit frozen when you're not buying a car, when you're not opening a new credit card yourself, is that if anyone else tries to go in and use your information to do these things, that the credit bureaus are going to stop them in their tracks. They can't go and get an auto loan or open a new TJX card and buy a bunch of stuff if your credit's frozen. So Best practice would be to keep it frozen when you're not using it. You can still use your credit cards, you can still use your own existing credit, but it's only for new applications that we want to avoid anyone who's not you or your family, pushing those through. And one thing that I'll add here, I think for children, especially under the age of 16, who aren't even eligible for most credit offers in general, we've been asking our clients to freeze their credit reports as well. And I'll give you one quick example. We had a client who had a computer that was compromised, and all of the social security numbers, birthdays, everything, was basically out there. They knew this, and they did, all the steps to protect the husband and wife that they could. They had two young kids, and a couple months later, out of nowhere, they started getting these credit card offers for the children. And normally, if you're someone like me, you get these offers in the mail from American Express or JetBlue, 60,000 miles if you open up a new card. But the problem with these coming for the daughters is that they were only 11 years old at the time. So they weren't supposed to be getting marketing information from these credit agencies or different places. And what had happened is that someone went online and tried to claim some sort of like tax benefit for children, and they were using the social security numbers and trying to go in and use these actively. So even if you're a child with no history of credit, it doesn't mean that your information can't still be used for different things in different ways. So again, adding just this one little layer of a credit freeze with the bureaus, even if you're young, can be all you need to protect yourself, and the criminals will kind of just move on to the next easier target there. So we definitely recommend it, not just for adults, but also for children alike.
And we'll be sending you an after presentation summary. And on that summary sheet are the top 3 credit agencies and their website address that you can contact each one of them and freeze your credit. And when I went on in advance of the presentation to see if it's still currently, because I have frozen all of mine for about 5 years, and it's even simpler than it has ever been to freeze and unfreeze.
Absolutely. That's a good one. And just to kind of reinforce this point, I think that there's also other third party, we didn't get it approved for this presentation, Wendy, and I think that I'm going to follow up. I can send it over, but our clients are using a third-party application called EverSafe, which is logged in and hooked into all 3 major bureaus. And I actually just started using it myself, and I think that it's probably the best thing that I've done to protect it. Like I've found more instances and more oversight things than I thought I was expecting to. But what it does is it's basically tracking all of your credit inquiries, all of your transactions, and they're looking for things that are outside of the norm, outside of the pattern. So one example is I just recently traveled to a wedding in Philadelphia. And while I was there, I put lunch on my card and some people paid me back. And within a couple hours, I got an email from EverSafe saying, hey, we noticed this large transaction. It was outside of your normal geographic zone of 100 miles outside Boston. Can you confirm that this is real, and do we need to do anything about it, basically? So what this company is, it's not a major credit bureau, it's not a credit card company, but they do provide additional support if and when you need it in the case of your information being compromised, or if there truly is a fraudulent transaction, they're going to help you navigate the pathway going forward. So we really want to do all of these, the little things, strong passwords, freezing credit. But if you want to go above and beyond and, pay for these services, I do know that the major credit bureaus offer them as well. So as you're freezing your credit, if you want to make a big, $50 or $100 investment in the annual subscription, that will absolutely protect you more than what you're doing now if you're not already using those. So we've been recommending it more and more to our clients. The EverSafe platform also gives you the ability to link in and give access to other family members. So if you're concerned about an aging parent or a child who's going off to college, you can get them signed up as well. And the notifications don't have to be, constant. They're not an everyday thing. But, if your 90-year-old mother starts taking out multiple credit card applications in 1 week, that's maybe something that you need to know about sooner rather than later. The sooner we can jump on these, I think that the better results we're going to get in the long run. So, um, I think that just kind of in closing, we're not going to ever be perfect online with these, and there's always going to be a stronger password or more that we could be doing to protect ourselves. But if we do, experience fraud, it's not going to be the end of the world. We don't need to take drastic measures, just out of necessity. But we do need to place a fraud alert and contact, whichever credit card company or issuer that it happened on. We definitely want to close those accounts, even though it's frustrating and you have to re-enter in your information on different websites and link things back up. It's going to be better off in the long run to just close them out completely. And then the last two, I think, are important just to explain like what actually happens if and when you do experience fraud. Is that if you don't report to the local police, and there's some local federal agencies as well that you can report this sort of cybercrime to, then a lot of times the credit card companies will give you a little bit of trouble for not documenting it properly, and they'll look for more out of you. So that's not to say that they're not going to take the charges off and make you whole again, but the more time that we can save in going through these steps, that's just, true money back in your pocket. We don't want this to take months or years to resolve. So if you do experience some sort of crime, or if you think that you're being targeted on a repeated basis, by adding to the file an identity theft report, you'll have an agency that's going to stand behind you and say, yes, this is really happening, and we've documented it, and it's been done the proper way. So, hopefully we've talked about some things that, some steps that we can take to protect ourselves today. And I'm excited to open it up to the Q&A, because I really want to take it in whatever direction you guys want to go from here. I think I went a little bit over time in the presentation, but understanding what you guys are worried about and also talking through some things that are available, I think will be a great way that we can keep the conversation going, and hopefully I can share some more thoughts.
We did have one question in the chat. First, thank you very much, Josh. All very relevant information. And when Josh and I were preparing for the presentation, I thought, I stay on top of this stuff, as many of you that I know in this group, but it's just amazing. Like, I've been thinking about getting a VPN, and I've been doing a lot of traveling in the airports, and I thought, this is when I should have my own VPN. I can get one that goes with me, right? And also when I'm in Europe and I need to do something, it can make me look like I'm in the USA. So I can still have access to sites that once you leave the US borders, you're sometimes shut down from having access to certain sites, even as something as simple as NBC, something like that. So, but yeah, I was happy to see credit freezing in Josh's presentation, because it's something I have shared with all of my clients in a newsletter. I think I did include that company you were referring to, Josh, in my
Okay, great.
summary that I'll be sending to everybody, so that you'll have some resources to turn to. I think even if you're walking away from this with one thing, just one thing, even if it's like to shut off your locator, right? Like, that's something, and to not have autofill passwords and usernames. It gets us to really know our usernames and passwords for individual apps. But that when we have things that are convenience oriented, I think it's good to think we are opening ourselves up to cyber attacks. So I think it is a handoff. But let's go into some of the chat. And so
Yeah.
someone
These look
had
good.
asked, I'm sorry, what did you say, Josh?
No, I was just reading off them. If you want to read off a couple of these questions.
Yeah, Josh, what about bills that are paid directly through the bank account? Is that a concern?
Yeah, so I personally try to pay with my credit card whenever I can. And the one example that I'll give you that they won't let me do that is with utility companies. So like EverSafe and, EverSource and National Grid. They don't let you pay with a credit card because they're scared of, someone not paying back the credit card and then they get the money ripped back. So they require that you link to a bank account. And if we were talking to our clients about just safety in general, I think it's okay to have some of these bills paid directly, especially if they're reoccurring normal ones on a monthly basis. So as you're reading through your statement each month, you'll see Verizon, you'll see, uh, EverSource, but I wouldn't necessarily link to a bank account that is going to have more than 3 to 6 months of your living expenses in there, because I would consider, anytime that you're putting out your account number and your routing number, that's kind of like a compromising event. So if I was paying my cleaning lady or my landscaper and I just wrote out a physical check, I wouldn't want that information to get out there to anyone. But even if it did, I don't want it to go further than a few months of living expenses. So just by adding that, maybe that one account that's dedicated to those reoccurring expenses, and then just keeping enough in there that you're not going too overboard, that would be kind of our recommendation for best practice. But everything else, I would say whatever you can put on a credit card, like airline tickets, and there's just so many incentives right now to put them on the credit cards anyway, that I think people are naturally doing this. But immediately after, I'll go in and I'll pay that credit card off, and it'll be a similar experience, but it's added that extra layer of protection with Visa or MasterCard right in between. But that's a great question.
Another question was, how do you get a credit freeze? I can answer this one because, like I said, I've done it for many years. And as Josh mentioned, there's three major credit organizations, credit tracking organizations in the United States. And on the follow-up materials that we send you for this webinar, you'll receive each one of those three web addresses. And you simply go to each one of them and you'll find a button on the homepage of each one that's going to say freeze my credit. And then you'll just follow through, and it's really, you normally have to put in your name. You have to set up an account at each one of these because they're monitoring your credit, right? And that they're going to try to sell you for their program, here, pay $3 a month, and you don't have to do any of that. You can just set up an account with each one of them and then say to them that you would like to freeze your credit. They'll give you choices sometimes. Would you like to freeze your credit for 3 months? I just have it permanently frozen, and that when I'm going to go and maybe buy a new car, and it's funny, it happened to me at Kohl's about a year ago. They're like, oh, why don't you get one of our cards, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay, go ahead. And I forgot my credit was all frozen. And they came back to me and they said, we can't get any information on you. Is your credit frozen by chance? I'm like, yes, it is. And they're like, well, you get the promo anyway because you said you would open up the card. And so then I just thought it was great. And then when I went in to unfreeze it, it said, would you like to unfreeze it for 24 hours, 5 days, 1 month? And then it will automatically go back to being frozen again. So I think they've come a long way. 5 years ago when I did it, you just didn't have that flexibility of those convenience options for unfreezing and refreezing.
And I think it has to be free now. I think there's some sort of regulation that the companies cannot charge you to freeze and unfreeze. It's all free service.
Right, there is a freeze. Yeah, freezing and unfreezing is free, but their monitoring of
Yeah,
your
they're
account,
add-ons.
they're
Yeah,
going to try to sell you those services,
exactly.
which I don't. Yeah, it's up to you whether you want them or not. Let's see. I have been at home for over 25 years, and recently I have been receiving credit card offers at my address for someone who doesn't or has never lived here. Should I be concerned?
Yeah, I mean, like that could be certainly one that we watch closely. And you wonder if someone had some of your information, but not all of it. Could they use your address, or was it just inadvertent? Someone put the wrong town in and it was the right street address, but not the right town. We might not be able to be, online detectives and figure out exactly the cause, but I think that it's a perfect encapsulation of like, if you know that you're not supposed to be receiving these credit card offers, but they just keep coming in for some reason, then maybe someone tried something or there was, an attempt at some point. And this is really like the only receipt that you have afterwards. So if that happened to me, I would definitely take some of these extra precautionary steps. Something like freezing my credit would stop those people from actually taking out a credit card or a line of credit. But maybe someone went through part of the process to sign up for something and then, didn't get all the way through. But definitely concerning to have someone else's mail coming to your house, and especially if it has anything to do with credit or banking or anything like that. I would hate for them to be using your address to receive their mail. And, if they're sending out, they have to put in an address when they sign up, but they don't have, a place to put, that's where they're going to start to farm it out and find people's addresses. So definitely, if you're concerned, I would take that extra step and freeze your credit and maybe even add on that $3 a month or $100 a year monitoring service to make sure that nobody is continuously trying to access anything.
Jen said, I have one of those services that monitors if my info has been found on the dark web. Recently, my info was found on the dark web. Is there anything I need to do specifically or any services that help to address that?
Yeah, good question. I don't think that you need to do anything necessarily. I think that almost everyone in the US is going to have some sort of their information being passed around at any given time. That's just kind of the reality that we live in today. So it's more about playing defense on the back end versus playing offense and trying to get your information taken down. So again, this would be an example of, now that you are armed with this information, going that extra step to adding a VPN or resetting passwords, resetting accounts, that might be just enough that you need. But like when I came up personally, I think I was on like one of these dark web scans and it showed back in 2017, something I did on Facebook was sold to someone else. And then all of a sudden, like, that's everywhere. So I don't know how much information I would have necessarily put into Facebook, but if I did one of those quizzes or something, I don't know what I was doing back then. I typed in my name, I typed in my phone number, and all of a sudden that information is being bought and sold without me knowing about it. So I think that just having these applications and being notified that your name did come up on one of these lists is arming yourself with more power, and then going the extra mile to add in other security features to what you're already doing will be more than enough to protect yourself. But don't worry. I mean, I don't want to tell you not to stay vigilant, but I think that a lot of people, you'd be surprised how much information has been leaked or has been compromised by all different. I don't know. I think like Home Depot had a huge one a couple of years ago. Even the credit agencies have fallen victim in some cases. So um, it's just I wouldn't want to. Don't put on your tinfoil hats yet, but I wouldn't be too stressed about finding your name coming up on that list.
And do keep in mind, because we're living in a cyber world, that, as Josh just said, breaches are going to take place. And when they do, they are required by law to give you notification within a certain amount of time that a data breach has taken place and the measures that they are taking to rectify it. And if there's any compensatory action, they're going to provide to you. Often those compensatory actions are that they're going to provide you with a free year of credit monitoring services. So I encourage you to take advantage of those. Don't let any of them, bypass you, that you've already sustained the breach. So please do take advantage of any services.
Definitely, definitely. And I see one more question up there from Art on security issues from instant messaging, such as SMS or text messages, iMessage. And I think this is a big one nowadays because I look at these as being really private spaces. It's not so like other people can read my texts necessarily, but the reality is that more and more these are being linked to other applications. So I'll pick on iMessage, for example. My wife just got a new laptop, and when she set it up, she put in her phone number, and now she gets all of her iMessages on her laptop as well as her cell phone. And it's super convenient. It's nice to type back and forth and send these messages. But what it also means is that when she logs into her bank account and asks for that PIN to be sent, not only is it being sent to her phone, but it's also being sent to her laptop and anything else that could be logged in through iCloud, through Apple. So if someone compromised your iCloud account and they were able to receive your iMessages, then that might be enough to negate your two-factor authentication. So all of a sudden they've got your username, they've got your password, and when they go to log into Bank of America, they get a text message too that says, here's your 6-digit code, go for it. So I think that that's a big one nowadays. Another one that comes to mind too, and I have an iPhone, so that's what I'm most familiar with. But when I go into the search feature at the top of iMessage, I can search for any string of characters that I want. And that search doesn't just go into the messages themselves, but it also goes into the data or the documents that are being sent. So for example, if I text a picture of my daughter's social security card. So I take a picture of it on the counter and then I text it to my wife who needs it for something. That text message is going to be indexed and Apple's going to go in and read everything on that social security card. And it makes it very accessible. If someone has your phone for some reason and they go into iMessage and they search social security, the iPhone is going to do a really great job putting all of the messages from all of your chats into one easy to read place. And you can scroll through and see exactly what's on there. So you can search for those, you can search for emails, you can really search for anything. So I wouldn't worry too much about the back and forth. I think Apple and iMessage do a great job on encryption, the data itself. But once the information is delivered to the other side, you don't know what those people are doing with it. You don't know if their phones have passwords on them or if your information is just, out there for their phone to be compromised. So I would avoid putting any personally identified information in text message form, even if it's like a photo message or something that isn't necessarily in the body of the text. It's becoming more and more prevalent and easier for you to tap into whatever multimedia you're sending over there and for that to be compromised. So that would be my 2 cents. I wouldn't put any you know secure information in there, but I also wouldn't worry too much about just like talking to someone back and forth in normal conversation.
So I think I'd just like to wrap up by saying a couple of my top things that I would be doing for myself. One, I've already done my credit freeze, so I think that's a top one. Many people are using their debit cards for all purchases. If there's anything I could have you walk away from this cybersecurity webinar, is that stop using your debit card for any purchase. That it takes away a major layer of protection that you have from a credit card company who is going to be paying that bill. And it puts a separation between the cyber attacker and your money. So when you use a debit card, you are removing a whole layer of protection. So you do not want to be using your debit card directly for any purchases. You will always want to use a credit card. And as Josh said, he has his credit cards that go through PayPal or Apple Money or Samsung Money, whatever you're using, Google Wallet, to then make the, or PayPal to then make those payments. And I really like, Josh, how you had talked about changing your password. And I try to think about changing my password in January and July. So you just kind
Perfect.
of make one massive change of everything all at one time, twice a year. January, July, you know that you're going to be changing your passwords. Then the VPN is one thing I'm going to be doing for myself and for my company for additional protection in addition to the encryption that we currently already use. And so, Josh, what was one of your big takeaways that you would encourage
Yeah,
viewers
all of those
to?
things were perfect. The only other thing would be like those third-party monitoring services. So as you're going through the credit freeze, if you look at what Experian offers, what TransUnion offers, they have some really great products. And the only reason why I encourage my clients to go with the EverSafe product that we're using is that that one application will link into all three bureaus all at once. So rather than just choosing one of them, you do get access, or you can get access to all three. And it's just like, if you went to buy a car and someone's sitting across from the desk from you and they can look up your credit report, everything that's on there, once you're a member of this service, becomes immediately visible to you. So you can see all of your existing lines of credit. You can see all of the payments that you've made. And moreover, like I said, with the notification, you can turn on different notifications to show you when transactions are being made that are outside the norm. So if someone tries to buy something in California and you've never been to California in your life, that would be an excellent, example of like, this could be a fraudulent charge. Please review this as soon as possible. And I think that time is like the greatest thing that you could preserve here with these sorts of fraud and scams. And the longer that something plays out, the worse outcome people are having. So we want to try to nip these things as soon as possible. And if there's even one small example, or someone tries to do a little test charge of only $1, we want to know about that right away and act on it. So I can't do that on my own, but using these credit monitoring services, it just equips you with so much more information and makes you a much harder target for these people.
Any idea what the estimated costs are on those services, Josh?
Yeah, I think that that one that I just said is either $60 or $100 a year for like their base package. And then they also have add-ons if you're a business owner or if you own real estate, that they'll do like background checks on those as well. So that's one. I actually read a pretty crazy story. I think it happened locally where someone had their house. It was a like new construction house, maybe in Sudbury or somewhere local. And they someone sold their house without them knowing. And I don't know, I see Jennifer just poked her finger up. It seems like it couldn't happen. And like the fact that it got through attorneys and the banks and people, like money changed hands, just incredible, like that it got that far. So I'm not going to say that like the credit bureau, like the monitoring agencies would have stopped that completely, but by adding in that extra layer of having like a background check on your real estate or your addresses, that will make sure that nobody is trying to file reports with the city that aren't you, or any number of things.
Okay. If I didn't put that company into the follow-up material, I will modify it and then send that out. Art had a question. Can you request the bank to suspend your debit card?
That's a good question. I think
I
that you
think,
can. We have it actually at Raymond James, like for a brokerage account that you can add. We call it the capital access feature that basically links a checking account to it. But for most of our clients that are not using checks and or a debit card, we opt them out of that completely. So I can't speak to other banks, but if you go into your branch and you say, hey, like for this checking account, I have a debit card, I have checks. I never use the debit card, but every 3 years you send me a new one and I just stick it in my wallet or stick it in my safe. They might be able to turn that feature off so that it's truly just a checking account with checkbooks linked to it. Nothing else out there, no other account numbers that someone might get a hold of. So it might be possible.
or just your digital access when you're at the
Yeah,
branch and pulling money
exactly.
out, that it could be used for that, but just for identification. But I agree that you should be able to ask your bank to shut off services on a particular card that you don't want to be used.
Definitely.
Someone asked, what if the monitoring services get hacked? It's always a possibility
Yeah,
because this is what the dark web is all about. They spend their days and nights and hours trying to do exactly that. So
yeah.
we're
And
all
the
susceptible.
Experian hack was pretty recent. And I think that they're still kind of going through the fallout. And what basically happened was Experian, with one of the biggest breaches of all time so far, they had their back end of their servers that were kind of like left exposed. I don't know what exactly the technical way that people got in there, but all of the information that they were indexing became public at some point. So I would like to say that that's not going to happen and that it can't happen, but the reality is that you kind of are opening yourself up to any number of risks when you add in more layers to your financial life. So just doing a little bit of all of these recommendations, I think will help you, but I don't know if I would lose sleep overnight, uh, you know, just over these agencies getting hacked right now.
Someone asked about LifeLock. Are you familiar with that service, Josh?
Yep, I think LifeLock is a great one. That one I think has been around for a long time. I feel like that's just like a household name at this point. And they probably go even a step further with more of like a concierge service, where they might have people working and following your transactions, your accounts. The one that we're using, EverSafe, is definitely like a self-serve option. So you're, as the individual, responsible for going in and putting in the information that you want to see, uh, not putting in other things. But I would say that something is going to be better than nothing. So if you're familiar with LifeLock and you think that that's really your big concern with whatever they can deliver, then I think that using them is going to be better than just not using any service at all.
Very good. So I think that kind of wraps it up, unless anybody has any other questions. In the materials that we have already sent to you, that you can contact Guthrow Law if you have some questions regarding estate planning, if you have some more questions regarding the cybersecurity or financial advising, that Josh is the person that you would turn to. You can contact either one of us for specific questions, and if we need to send it to the other, then we'll do that. Thank you all for attending. And as I said, we will follow up with some information that will be a summary of the things that we outlined here. It will have the 3 credit bureaus on there. We'll also make sure it has that additional resource that Josh is recommending for credit monitoring of all of the 3, as well as an extended service that's available. And it will also have instructions in the very bottom, a checklist of if you are exposed and have a cyber attack, of the steps that you should follow to protect yourself. So thank you very much, and appreciate everyone stopping in and joining us for this cybersecurity webinar. Thank you again, Josh.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Wendy, for hosting.
If you would like help or have questions about this information, please give us a call at 781-229-0555 or visit our website at guthrowlaw.com. We look forward to hearing from you.